G'day everyone, Dikko here with another kick-ass walkthrough. We are now at part 7 of my ultimate character building series, and in this video we are going to retopologize the body. Well, most of it at least, because as I was recording the content for these tutorials, I found that as I was doing more and more, the videos were getting way too long, so I need to split it up into a few chunks. So we're going to start off by retopologizing most of the body, and then in the next video, we're going to jump into doing the hands and possibly the feet as well. So let's jump straight into the process. And of course, if you like this video, feel free to show your appreciation by liking it. And of course, if you want to stay up to date with the latest tutorials as I bring them out, feel free to get subscribed. And if you want the source files for this video, jump onto Patreon, give a few dollars. Every tier gets access. And yeah, any support is wholly appreciated. So let's get started. Okay, so last time we literally completed the entire face within about an hour. Now, for our next stage, I'm figuring we may as well just jump straight into doing the body. We can always worry about filling up the head later because it's just not all that important, I guess you can say, in the grand scheme of things. It's just a gridded structure. So I figured it's best to just jump straight into the important loops first and then sort of work out the rest later. So what I'm going to recommend is we're going to establish our main 2 loops. So our main 2 loops out of this entire structure here, which are probably the most important, and the rest can be kind of secondary, are the loops that you encounter around the intersection between the shoulders and the waist. All right. These loops are super important for really clean deformation, particularly around the thigh and the crotch when you start to lift the leg up and when you move the arms around. Everything else is sort of like secondary in terms of what you need to consider, in my opinion. So what we're going to do is establish those loops first and then jump into all the other nitty-gritty parts. So I'm going to grab a face here. I'm going to duplicate that and move it all the way down. I'm going to duplicate that and move it all the way down the body, like over here somewhere. Move it forward. I'm going to scale that up. And what we're going to do is establish the fact that underneath the breast tissue is a chest. All right. Now, technically, if you're doing a male character, this is the same principle. You're just doing it at the bottom of the breast of the male, and you don't have to worry about the fleshy part of the breast all that much in relative terms. All right. So what I'm going to do is grab this area and start to doing a bunch of extrusions that will travel underneath the breast tissue, up along the contour of that breast area there, over the shoulder where we have this, the cap of the shoulder there, around the back, and then just sort of connect there at the back there. All right, so let's go ahead and do that, keeping it real simple. 1, 2, 3. That'll do for now. Move this up, following that contour of my shoulder. Now, if you're doing a more cartoony character, you may not need to worry about this much detail in terms of defining areas of deformation. But it is really important when it comes to doing relative realistic or stylized human characters that have some level of, analogous features of a real person. All right, cool. All the way down to the back, and boom. Just like that. So what you should have is sort of almost like a trace of the rib cage, I guess you can say. Or in the case of a male, this would be sitting up here. Basically, that would just sit up there, and that would sort of be the contour of our breast tissue for the male. The next loop is going to be the crotch area. So what I'm going to do, again, duplicate a spot, bring it into the center. Actually, not even bring it into the center, just duplicate it. This one basically acts almost like a shoulder, if you think about it. But basically, it's going to sit like this. Now, technically, this loop can either travel back under the crotch or come into contact at the center of the back or the small of the back. I'm going to go with the small of the back for now. So basically what I'm creating is a pseudo bikini line, if that makes sense. All right, cool. Now this area here may look like nothing else, but we need to establish a a pole here. All right, this pole will help us determine that area that we need to sort of start to link up using like a grid structure. Okay. All right, let's add a loop there. Actually, we'll worry about that loop in a second. Actually, we do need a loop now. We need a loop now. All right, cool. And this will join up with this, and this will join up with the back as well. All right. So keeping those shapes in mind. Let's go ahead and move that up a little bit. Cool. All right. So that 5-pointer start is really important. And you'll notice that we start to get essentially a spiral as we start to bring this loop down, up and back up the back. That's not a bad thing. It's actually quite useful in this case. So I'm not going to fight it. All right, cool. All right, so now let's get this loop going through underneath the crotch. Oops. Up. Like so. Shit. Sometimes the snapping does behave a little bit weird. So it's good to sometimes manually align that up. So basically that loop that we're creating here will help us establish this connection. So you may notice as well, we have these extra loops here that are also traveling down that we need to sort of rectify. So these loops have to come up and around as well. So we need to actually turn off the mirror modifier just for a second and slide this across. Let's move that across. So we have some wiggle room. Turn on the mirror modifier again. Wiggle room to connect the front of the body again. Cool. Let's go ahead and fill those out. Whoops. Now you will be surprised how quickly the overall body does come into shape once we've established these loops. All right, cool. Again, let's at least turn off the clipping just for now. So we have some space to work with this. All right, cool. Awesome. All right. Now we can split this up at one more time. And now we have enough room to link up the front. Now, the reason I'm trying to avoid another sort of reduction in geometry there is because when you do that, like put a sort of change in direction here, you get a weird crotch-like shape on female characters, which I feel like it doesn't look quite right, if you know what I mean. So it gives it a mound or a bulge that, generally speaking for women, you don't want to have a bulge in a character like this. So that's why I've done it that way. All right, cool. So what I'm doing is just filling out the top row here as well. Now, technically, I could merge it like this, so we get a nice loop like so. So that will help me keep that shape of the top of the butt there as well. And notice how it's technically a spiral, but it terminates in the middle, so it doesn't actually go throughout the whole body. For me, that's fine. It's not going to cause any issues, so I'm going to keep it that way. Sort of like an intentional spiral, if that makes sense. All right, cool. What that's also done is that it's also reduced the amount of geometry going up the spine by 1, so you get a lot less density in the middle or the small of the back, which is, pretty much ideal at this stage. At this stage now, we can go ahead and fill out the body. So I'm going to go ahead and just do that. 1, 2, 3. Now we can see here that we haven't got anything to link up there, so we're going to do a extrusion out like so. I want to sort of line that up with the middle of the armpit. So just underneath the armpit, 2, like that. Move this over here like so, and like so. Let's go ahead and then fill it out. 1, 2, 3. And now you can see here we need another loop there. 4. Done. Oh, we need one more. There we go. Even better. There we go. Filled. And now we sort of have what we need for the body. Let's just add a bunch of loops. Boom. So the body is pretty much done for the torso. Now, generally speaking, you could technically go ahead and add some defining loops for the abs if you're going to go down that way. I wouldn't really bother for the most part because you can get away with that doing texturing. So all you're going to be adding is extra complexity to a mesh that doesn't really need it, especially if you're going to put clothes on top of this character. Yeah, it just makes the rigging process a little bit more annoying. So you're better off just sort of flattening things out and letting the verts position do all the work. And you can see here that we're still getting those defining areas in the mesh anyway. And it's likely that we're going to be adding more loops down the vertical spans as well. So yeah, even furthermore, you're going to get some definition there as well. Unless you specifically really want to add like physical abdomen muscles or anything like that into it. Yeah, it's not all that necessary. But from a rigging perspective, it's fine as is. And it will deform just as well. And I'll be honest, if you plan on doing simulation, something like this, like a flat grid structure, would probably work out better than having to have physical muscles to, move around. Because you're going to be basically having an underlying mesh with subdivision defining those simulations. All right, cool. That's looking pretty good. So now let's link up the back. Like so. Nice. And we can pretty much continue that throughout the rest of the body. So over here, we have this. And now we have the intersection of the arm to worry about. Okay. So what I recommend is where we start getting that change in direction, we use that to our advantage to define the armpit or the bottom of the arm and link that up with the top, like so. So generally speaking, you want to keep it relatively symmetrical as well on the spans going around the arm. I'll explain to you why that matters in a second. So a minimum of 8 spans, but you can go 10 or 12 if you want to. Right now we have 6, so I'm probably gonna have 12 going across the top. Or if I look at the loops here, rather, that's the more important ones. I have 7 at the moment, so I have an uneven spread of loops. That is likely down to how I've connected this arm. So I have 1 there. So I'm missing a span here, I think. Yeah. Yeah, that's probably because we don't have that change in direction here. So I can add a span there. But first, let's link this up like so to match. Yeah, see how we haven't got that span? We need to add a span here. Right there. See how I want to make sure that I have these 3 lined up underneath the arm to travel down the side of the body. By adding this loop here, I can now connect it to this loop here. And now we have a nice clean, even spread across. So 1, 2, 3 on this side, 1, 2, 3 on this side before we get to that area of the shoulder that we want to keep voluminous. So now we have 8, or we should have 8. I don't know what says 7. 22 edges, 7 faces. 1, 2, 3. Yep. 1, 2, 3, 4. Interesting. All right. Well, we can fix that up. So what I just said is probably bullshit. So basically, let's just fix that up so we have an even spread. 1, 2, 3, like so. So you can see here that sometimes you just got to be a bit more mindful and make sure that you're keeping the consistency in line. So now that should look a lot better. 6, that's much better. Cool. So sometimes the positioning of your loops and how they've been stretched out can cause a little confusion. So just don't be too afraid to sort of go back and say, okay, well, something's missing here, or something's not right, or the position's not right. It's causing me to get this aberration in, my distribution of, where I want to do cuts and stuff. So there we go. All right, so what I want to do with this loop here underneath the armpit is create a separation device between the arm and the rest of the body. This area here will help me build out the cap of the shoulder. So I'm going to do the same thing on the top as I have on the bottom. 1, 2, 3, 4 faces. 1, 2, 3, 4. And now this will link up there. Cool. So just see how quickly we actually get in this point. We've already established quite a lot of information off the get-go. So now to cap out the shoulder, pretty straightforward. We need to make sure that we have enough geometry to play with. And this is where my confusion was coming from, I think, is that I just didn't have enough cuts here. So I'm going to go ahead and add a cut here. I'm going to fill out this cap here, and this area here. I'm just going to add a split there. Scale that in a little bit. And this is still a quad. It just looks like a diamond. And what this will do, it will add a supplementary division between the area of the neck and the clavicle. So we're going to have a loop that sort of defines the chest area, but also have an area that defines the clavicle area. And that will give us enough information for some pretty good deformation around the shoulder. All right, so what we can do here is just extrude into the middle. This one's going to be the same thing, except we're going to extrude with an edge. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we're just going to fill that out. 1, 2, oops. 1, 2, 3, 4. So now what we have is a nice clean loop that goes over the cap of the shoulder and into the clavicle. All right, nice. We can add a few loops now to match the front and the back. So I'm going to add 3 there. Since I have 3 there, may as well be consistent for now. Always feel free to redistribute as needed. All right, and now what I want to do is define a sort of shoulder strap area that is sort of gives us a nice area to sort of just have a little space for deformation. So this area here, I'm just going to add a bit of a shoulder strap, of course, so to speak. And this will just help me maintain the fact that I don't want any spirals to be happening, like one going around and spiraling around the span of the body. So I'm going to be very mindful of that, or try to be mindful of that rather. All right, let's fill this out. Cool. And now we have the information we need to build out the neck in the future. But for now, let's go ahead and finish out the breast tissue. So let's connect these two together and split that in half. Now, technically, we have all we need to successfully create our grid fill, except for one span. So I'm going to go ahead and add one span here, and then move this one across a little bit. and just fill in a grid. And boom, we got ourselves enough information there. Now you can see that the amount of information we have is pretty limited. So if I really wanted to have like proper breast tissue, I can either do an extrusion in like this, like grabbing, let's do a split there first, grabbing that in mind, and then doing an extrusion in like this. That will help me give enough information to, sort of build out the breast tissue. But because this character is going to be closed, I'm not going to really bother too much about that. I'm just going to add some spans that go around to the back because I still need enough information there to deform the body anyway. So it's actually going to be quite useful to just simply increase the amount of spans I have traveling around the body. All right, so for here, we have 1, 2, 3. I already have one down here, so I'm going to go ahead and fill in an extra span there and do a grid fill. And now we have our underarm complete. All right, so basically, our character is almost done in terms of its overall body. So now the only challenges left are the legs, the arms, and the hands. So not bad for 20 minutes, 25 minutes. But with that being said, now that I do have that geometry there for the breast, I can go ahead and just add a little bit more there. So you can see that we are encountering an issue in the sense that because there's just not enough vertical spans, we're not getting the curvature of the breast. So it's likely in this case that we're going to have way more spans traveling down from the neck anyway, that I'm not going to add new splits just yet because I need to see how the neck and the face are going to connect to the rest of the body. So it's likely that we're going to have a lot more geometry coming down this way anyway, at least a couple spans to give enough definition to the breast tissue in this case. And this is also a good example of what a male geometry would look like anyway. So technically, it could work just as well for a male character than a female character as well. So cool. All right, that's pretty much done. Now let's go ahead and do the arms. And in this case, why am I selecting the wrong loop? Cool. In this case, we need to start thinking about how we're going to define our arms. Now, I would say that there's probably not enough geometry to do that yet. You're going to get a little bit of stretching, especially as we straighten out the arm. So what I'm going to do first is add another loop connection. Basically I want to do this. Create some geometry there and then split it here. Yep, that looks a lot nicer. And split this here, like the same way here. Cool. You'll understand how this looks in a second as I go to link up the body. So now we're going to go ahead and straighten that out. Like so. This will link up here. Like so. And now we can cap it out. So we'll go ahead and cap that out. 1, 2. And fill that out like so. Cool. So let's have a look and see how many spans we have for the arm to work with. Only 6 for the time being. So that's pretty low. I would prefer to have at least 8. But we do have an issue in that we have, when we add a span here, it's just going to travel down the body. And we don't really need that. Same thing over here. We're also getting that same issue. So the solution in this case is pretty straightforward. I'm going to go ahead and select a loop like this on both ends where that pole is. And I'm going to create a bevel just to give it a little bit of separation there. and allow me to give me some more volume in the arm without traveling through the body. So this one will be, yeah, it would probably have to travel up this way, like that. See how I'm sort of breaking the connection there and just sort of, we're going to have another 5-pointed star there basically. So that's kind of normal in this card, in this regard. So if I push B now, Control B to create that span, let's see what we get. Let's smooth that out. And see how that feels for me. Now, I think that should be okay. Especially if I subdivide it and just see how that's looking. Yeah, I think that's going to look pretty good. So basically what I've created is a slight separation between these loops, just to give me some working room to sort of have spans travel into the center of the body. If I need to add extra spans for the arms, it just avoids me getting lots and lots of extra geometry going down the body. So I'm willing to live with that, and it gives me a nice clean crease as well to define for the cap of the shoulder, which is quite nice actually. I'm quite happy with that. So now with that out of the way, let's go ahead and flatten that out and begin. Notice how that's looking out, looking all right too. So it's looking all right too with the subdivision in mind. So if I were to subdivide that, that's looking pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and I've just turned on my shrink wrap again and start to extrude down the arm. Now the shrink wrap might be causing a little issues there. So let's go ahead and clean that up a little bit. There we go. Now in my previous videos, I've done a little sort of twist in the forearm. In this case, I'm not going to bother, especially if you end up using twist joints in your character. You get less, you don't have to worry so much about crushing effects as well anyway. So that could be pretty good for that. All right, cool. So you notice that things look a little bit less dense at the bottom. That's only because we haven't really distributed our arms geometry very well. So what I'm going to do is, as a quick fix, go to my Loop Tools add-on and just push circle, and that will just sort of help redistribute some of these. Oops. Redistribute some of these loops. Now it is breaking what I've got as a projection, but we're getting a much nicer distribution for now. Now we can go ahead and just re-snap the geometry to the arm. So that's looking pretty good. Oops. Make sure not to push F instead of G. Otherwise, you're going to fill in a hole in your geometry and it's going to cause all kinds of problems. All right, cool. So there we go. The arm is pretty much done for now. We're going to add a bit more geometry later on to sort of help define those areas a bit better. But overall, that's looking pretty good. Sometimes you may need to remember the general direction in which you want your spans to be rotated. So be mindful. And you can see here that we still need to have quite a bit of geometry for the elbow. All right. But I think overall we're in a good space. Now, in order to define the elbow a little bit more just for now, I'm going to go ahead and bevel that again and add 2 more loops, or just 1 loop for now. Sorry. And with that done, we should have some good basis to start to add some, specific loops for elbows and stuff like that. All right, cool. Now, just remember that if you are going to rig this character with twist in mind and you want to have physical joints doing it, like actual joints, like for a game engine, each span can represent a joint position. So if you want to have crazy toon arms, you will need to add quite a bit of geometry to be able to get those wavy toon arm effects. So fairly dense. All right, so surprisingly quick, we got the arms done. So let's just recap about what the loops look like. We have a loop for the chest that travels up and defines the cap of the shoulder, round to the back. We have a loop for the connection point between the arms and the elbow and the shoulder, which again is just loops there. We have another loop for the shoulder that travels around over the cap of the shoulder into the back and into the top of the chest. And then we have these spans here to help define the neck region. Now, technically, I would actually recommend probably just deleting this one just for now, because what I see as a problem is that a lot of the spans are going to travel down the neck and they may end up going down here into the crotch, which is probably less than ideal. I'd much rather have any spans that may need to go down to travel over the breast down into the thigh, because at least they can terminate somewhere without it getting too bunched up in the crotch area. So that's something that's worth considering as well. So I might go ahead and delete this. So I'm just putting a little bit of foresight here, and then you'll understand once I get to that point. Then finally, we have the loops for their arms. So we've gone ahead and separated out one single loop to allow us to sort of add some extra geometry if we need to around the span of the arms, and that is done identically in the back as well. Now you may notice that unlike other tutorials you may see online, I don't really care about defining the back muscles. The reason for that is, one, you rarely see it. Two, it's likely that you can get away with just really good tech, like decent normal maps and normal map baking to create the definition of the back. And three, all you're going to do is add complexity to the rigging when you don't need it. All right. You still get some really good deformation just with a simple grid structure here. And you'll find that a lot of, like, even high end uh, geometries, for films and stuff, just keep the geometry really simple at the back. It's only when you generally want to have baked in details into a character, specifically maybe for like a game design or something like that, where you really need to define musculature in the mesh to sort of keep the silhouette really strong. But in a sense like this, you're much better off in Blender, at least, keeping the geometry simple, rigging it, and then adding a displacement modifier or a displacement in the shader with the musculature in the texture to pop out those muscles. So that's why I've kept it really simple there. Same thing with the abdomen as well. Okay, so the next thing to do is the legs. And now you may be tempted to just extrude out a tube, just out like that. That is not quite what we need to do. We essentially have to create the same thing as a shoulder cap in the hip. And that will help us get some geometry into the buttocks as well as give us a nice separation for deformation and crushing in the top of the thigh. So what I'm going to do is add a split here, just to add a little bit more geometry to play with before I do that, and then start to extrude out some faces around the thigh. This will help me define the butt, basically, if you need to define the butt, of course. If you don't need to define the butt, it's less of an issue. So I'm just going to add a few spans, sort of keeping a mental note of lining it up with the geometry here, but it doesn't have to be perfect. All right, cool. And I'm going to cap it in the middle of the butt. I'll explain why in a second. Because the butt sits lower than the front of the body. The muscle itself sits a little bit lower. So what I'm going to do is create a loop here that will travel up the body and help define the cheek area of the buttocks, like so. Just like that. All right, cool. So that will give us some nice geometry to start to extrude the leg down. Let's go ahead and fill out this area first. And you'll start to understand what I'm doing here. I'm going to create a loop like so. Boom, boom, boom. And now we have some nice geometry to define the butt area. That can link up to over here or up here, depending. Let's say this one should be okay, I think. Actually, no, this will have to go here, I reckon. Once we clean that up, that distribution up a little bit, it'll look a lot better. So something like this. Yep, that looks a lot better. Cool. We have two spans here. We have a span there. We have a single span there, but we're definitely going to need an extra span going up the back of the neck anyway. So we're going to add a span down the spine and a span here to round out the butt. And now we can do a grid fill because it's nice and even. Smooth that out a little bit, and you got yourself a pretty nice bum. And that will give us plenty of geometry to play with as well when it comes to deforming the butt when a character squats or moves their leg up. You need the extra geometry to sort of keep the volume there. All right. So with that in mind, we can now start to link up this area of the upper thigh. All right, cool. So grabbing this, let's fill that in. You can see we still need some geometry here, so I'm going to add an extra loop and fill those in. Now this span I don't need, so I'm just going to go ahead and fill that in, or delete it, and now I'll do a grid fill, having added a split there. Awesome. Now you can see here that we have what looks to be an issue, but it's not really an issue. It's just a matter of how we combine these areas in our mesh. So we can have two ways of going about it. We either grid fill here, or do a fill here, and then cap it like so. Or we did it another way, where would we basically do the opposite, where we cap it here and then create a loop there. That is really up to you how you go about it, because this will work just as well. The only thing I'm not sure about is whether or not we'd end up getting some weird deformation errors or problems in this case, because you need to keep the diamond outwards. So I'm actually going to go the other way, where I will fill in this loop here and keep a nice crease there. So it gives me geometry I need to crease out the thigh when it moves up, but we're not adding too much geometry that it travels throughout the whole body. So that will give us a nice little crease when the thigh moves up. And what we will essentially get is a loop like this. We have a continuous loop that goes around like the, sort of like just like a brief line, I guess you can say. And the rest is now just a gridded structure to allow us to start filling out the leg. All right, so let's go ahead and line these up. It might be easier to just grab a whole bunch of them and then smooth it out like so. All right, cool. So from here on in, it's just this is where the easy part starts. It's just a matter of extruding out the leg now. We have everything we need for this thigh, and we have everything we need for the butt. So let's go ahead and extrude that out. So first extrusion down, you want to go ahead and just flatten it out a little bit so it just looks a little bit better evenly distributed. And you can see here on the other side, it's getting pretty well defined. All right, with that being said, let's go ahead and start to extrude down. The same thing applies for the arms, by the way. So if you are planning on doing toon arms or toony, cartoony limbs, you need to have the geometry that can support it. So you need to add your spans to support that kind of rigging. If you're just going to go with a low poly account with just one joint to define the legs and the feet, you probably don't even need any of this geometry at all, unless you have very specific needs in terms of definition. Every now and then, I might need to circularize just to redistribute those verts. Just like that. And of course, every now and then, it might be worth just turning off your shrink wrap modifier just to force some information there. Now, the reason why it's shrink wrapping there is because we have a knee there. So we'll need to sort of just define the knee a little bit more specifically there in the future. All right, let's just keep extruding down until we get to the ankle. And then, of course, be mindful of adding the right amount of loops you need to deform the leg should you want to deform it in a specific way, particularly cartoony stuff. Cool. So you can see here that we've basically got the entirety of the body almost complete. We are running into an issue, however, where we have a lot less geometry at the back of the leg than we do at the front. That's going to be problematic in the future when it comes to just like keeping things looking consistent. But we will have to add more geometry as we connect the neck down to the body. So I'm not too concerned about that right now. But a little cleanup will go a long way before we get down to that stage. All right, cool. And again, it's always worth just going through and just doing some manual tweaking to get those verts in the right spot. All right, cool. Now you can see here, so much more density than we have at the front than we do at the back. So yeah, let's just go ahead and add some. So we want to make sure that when we are adding it, it's not going to travel in the wrong direction, like underneath the butt. We want to use the spans that will help us aid in connecting the head to the body. So we want spans that can travel up the body in this case to define how much where the definition goes. So we also don't want to add more in places we don't need it. So if we have to, we will delete a face here for the time being and allow us to just add that geometry in the spots that we need it. Once you do that, feel free to redistribute the rotation of the spans a little bit. Don't forget to smooth out those spans as well. So the smooth tool will come in a lot in handy there. All right, cool. And there we have it. We have the body done essentially, which is really cool. So I think that took about 45 minutes again. Now it's just really about cleaning up areas of connection, particularly around the neck and the head, and then we'll worry about the feet and the hands later down the track. For this part area here, we should start to grab a bunch of verts. You can just simply grab the verts as needed and start to just smooth those out and redistribute those a little bit. All right, so let's figure out how to get the head connected to the body. Now, there are a few things to consider, namely that the density of the face is a lot higher than that of the body. So we need to figure out how to reduce the geometry there. Of course, we still have to do the skull. So we can reduce geometry pretty quickly along the top of the back, top of the head to the back of the neck and connect to the back. That's pretty easy. It's just the amount of geometry in the mouth that travels down the neck. So we have to find a way of redirecting that so that basically it can like sort of collapse in on itself, I guess you can say, or just round, go around the body entirely, around the. Okay, so with the general structure of the body done, we have 2 or 3 things left to do. We have to do the hands and the feet, obviously, and we need to connect the head to the body. Now, we're going to start off with the head to the body because it's probably the most straightforward, but it's not without its challenges. Basically, we have to figure out a way to reduce the amount of geometry going down from the mouth into the body. As you can see, it's quite a lot more dense at the bottom of the mouth here, or the chin, than it is in the body. Obviously, we still have to add some more geometry here because we are lacking some structure around the breast tissue, although there are ways we can do that without adding more geometry in the body. And of course, we need to connect it around the back. Now, the back is a lot more straightforward than what you might think. So we're going to go ahead and do that. So let's go ahead and jump into doing that right now. Let's just collapse some of this crap here. All right, so with that in mind, let's get started on connecting up the head with the body. All right, so you may notice that I've also switched on the mesh, the Retopo mesh, to have in front turned on, just for the sake of clarity at this point, because things start to get a little bit complex now. So let's start off with some basics, namely the scalp. So let's start off with doing the scalp first. I want to go ahead and start by connecting up the midsection of the scalp. So let's turn on our snapping onto faces. If you want to have on shrink wrap, you could do that as well. Of course, keep the settings on as they were before. So I'm just going to go ahead and just block out this first. Cool. We're going to establish the midsection of our scalp as well. Oops. And merge those like so. So now we have a clear sort of mid-section of the head. Not sure why it's snapping in include not entered. Okay, let's just push the face project. That's better. There we go. That's much better. All right, cool. So we got that going on there. Now let's get this going across the back of the head as well. You can see here what that's looking like in the other view. Now I'm just estimating how many faces I need for this. I'm obviously going to need more, but I just want to have enough to start getting the structure working all the way down to the back. All right, let's just merge those together. So now we have that connection up and running. We can start to think about how we connect other parts of the head. So starting with the base of the neck and the base of the ear, we can start to merge that together. Add a split there, and we're starting to sort of fill in those loops that sort of make sense to fill out. With these spans going around to the back of the head, makes sense just to continue that across the entirety of the head. So I'm going to add a few loops here. And here we go. So we're sort of working out the crown of the head and how that's going to come together. All right. So now we can see here that you can see a kind of natural break in direction around the ear. So what I would recommend is sort of figure out what those natural breaks are, where those changes in directions occur, and sort of determine where you want those spans to move. So in this case, I want these 4 spans, 1, 2, 3, 4, to basically go up across the top of the scalp, and this one here to go to around the back of the scalp. So this one can go around like so. We add a split. We can probably add 2 splits here. and we got that clear division there. This one will go up this way. So 1, 2, 3. Let's add 3 spans there. And 3 spans there. Fill those in. And now we basically going to repeat the same pattern here. So up until the top here, we have 3 spans. 1, 2, 3. There we go. And of course, it's probably wise to flatten those out a little bit. So let's go ahead and do that. Cool. And repeat the process. So what we're going to do here is just fill one side in, fill in 2 sides there. And because we have the exact amount of spans across the entirety of the scalp, we can do a grid fill. Whoops, I think I miscalculated. Ah, yes, there's an extra one there. Let's get rid of that one. Grid fill, done. Sweet. We can flatten those out now with a little bit of scale on Z, and then just sort of reproject those like so. Cool. So you can see how quickly this starts to fill out, at least for the head. This is why I left it for later. Over here, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 edges. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 edges here, and 2 edges there, 2 edges there. That means we can do a full grid fill on just this section alone. So instead of doing it all manually, we just grid fill. Done. Reproject it, and sweet. Done and dusted. We can continue this down through the back of the head just by counting how many edges we have. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have 1 there, so we need 4 more for that area. And then another grid fill. Done. So you can see just by like counting things and just being mindful how quickly it is to actually fill out the scalp. All right, cool. So obviously there's a lot less geo here than there is at the front. So we're going to have to add more geo as time goes on. But we're on good tracking right now for the scalp to be done pretty quickly. All right, cool. So we get to a point where we do have to have a change in direction for like where spans will travel up and around the top of the head and when they will travel around. So this is kind of that point there, but I don't want to touch on this yet until we figure out what to do with the amount of spans along the top of the head. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I'd say, before there's a major change in direction. So 5 spans that will travel along the top of the head. We have currently 1 and 2 to work with. So I'm going to add 1 more and 3 more here. All right. Now by doing that, let's see what we can do. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Fill it in like so. We're going to add a break there, bring it up like so. And then we can do another grid fill. And that looks like I miscounted again. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 there. Okay, we just have to get rid of one of the spans here. And that should fix the problem. Boom. So there we go. That's looking pretty sweet. Now we can see here that we can actually add more geometry around the back of the head so that we can see that we're starting to get a clear break in the direction of where spans are going to travel. So here we have 1, 2, so we need to at least add 1 more span there. Make sure to clean up along the way, of course. And we're going to go ahead and manually fill this part in because we just need to keep track of where things are breaking at the moment, or, not breaking, but traveling at the moment. So we do have to add 1 more span here. So we can just bring this one down a little bit first and then add another span there. And now we can maintain our quad structure here. And you can see that now we start to get a very clear understanding of where the spans are traveling around the scalp, like so. So we want to keep this pattern going. We don't want to have this going like around the front and then down the body. We want to keep this traveling around to the back of the head. Same with these ones here. We don't want this one to change direction and go right, I guess. There's no point because we actually need the extra geometry at the back to fill out these spans. So we actually need the geometry in the back and we need less geometry at the front in this case. So what we're going to do is connect this one here. So this one's traveling around from the front up across the scalp and then back down the body. So this makes sense to just do a simple fill at the moment between these two edges to get that edge flow going, like so. Now you can see we're starting to get a natural transition. So this span will continue around the back of the scalp. So to do that, we're just going to add a split here, move this over here, fill it, and then complete the loop so it looks like this. And what you'll end up having is a 3-pointed star where that transition point is happening. So you can see here we have one there and we have one there at the exact same point, but on opposite sides of the head. All right, cool. So we can start to add a bit more geometry on the side here to add out some volume. And we can start to smooth out the distribution of the edges and vertices around here as well. And I'll do that at the end once I've completely filled out the rest of the scalp. So you can see here we have 1, 2, 3 edges here, and we have none here to work with. So I'm going to add a couple more, 1, 2, 3, and then do a grid fill. Boom, sweet. So with that all done and dusted, our scalp is filled out. So now all we need to do really is just begin to smooth things out. So I'm going to use vertex selection for this one. Now this is where you can probably get away with using a shrink wrap to make it a little bit easier. So I'm going to go ahead and add one. Where are we? Shrink wrap. And make sure to choose your geometry. So in this case, it's going to be just sculpt. Cool. Of course, it's always good to just preview how that's looking and also just confirm some positionings there to make that look a little bit better, and then just start to smooth things out. You can also do this with sculpting, mind you, of course. Now, it may come at a time where these amount of spans going down the back of the neck might be too much. So we just have to be mindful of that as well. But I think for now, it will be just about right for what we need right now. Cool. I'm going to go ahead and save that. And of course, now I just want to quickly, I'm going to turn on wireframe on the mesh itself, this one, rather than everything in the viewport, and start to just smooth things out a little bit. That looks a lot better already. So I'm just using the sculpting tool for that. We'll make short work out of this in combination with the shrink wrap. Be mindful when using sculpt is that the clipping doesn't really work in the mirror modifier when you use sculpting tools for some reason. So it's always a good idea to just refine manually as well if you have to along the way. And it's at this point where I'd save it again. And then what I would do is duplicate that shrink wrap and apply the first one. It's not applying. Let's go ahead and, oh, it's going to be out of edit mode for that. Make sure to apply that first one. And now you'll see that it will probably work a little bit better. Behave a little bit nicer. All right, cool. All right, that'll do for now because there's still plenty of other things to sort of work out before we can do some final smoothing pass on this. So let's go ahead and start to work out the rest of the connection. So what we need to do is establish a way of reducing geometry in the neck and then also connecting it up so that we have a little bit more geometry to work with without it going haywire. So let's just establish our midsection of our face first. So what I would recommend is that the midsection of where the neck is, So sort of line up with the bottom of the ear. So that midsection of the shoulder should probably should sort of line up with that where the midsection of the skull is. So like that, where the jaw sort of comes into contact with the ear. So I'm going to do that first before I move on. Let's go ahead and fill those in. Like so. That's kind of what I want. In fact, I might even move it one span across rather than where it is now. So something like this. Wherever it feels most comfortable to you. So something like that feels comfortable to me. Now, of course, if I try to create a loop there, it won't travel throughout the body, except this one does. Well, there you go. That's kind of ideal, actually, where it sort of like goes across the top, but not necessary by any means. Cool. So let's go ahead and add a few spans here just to fill out the neck a little bit and get that shape going. And we start to see some natural breaks about where things should connect. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. So I'm going to fill in that area there, there, and there. And one of the biggest things that people tend to do is that they add way too much geometry in along the vertical spans of the neck. You don't need that many, honestly, to get articulation in the neck. So be mindful not to add too many if you don't need them. All right. So now we can see where we have connections needed. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and currently we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 spans to work with. Now, I'm not too concerned about that because it's likely that a loop that we're going to add here may end up traveling all the way around the body to up the back. So to see what I mean, I may end up having to add an extra span that goes all the way across the body, and it will travel up the front. And it makes sense here because we probably need that geometry at the front. And it will tighten up that buttocks a little bit if you wanted to add a bit more. And of course, it will travel up the back and give us the loops that we need. So that's a simple solution. Let's give it a go. So let's add our 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 spans now together. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Fill that in. Ooh, let's try this out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yep. And you can see that we will need some extra geometry there. We need 7 there. I missed one. That's okay. We can figure that out in a second. All right. Let's remove that one for now and fill this one in. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That worked out quite well there. So what we can do now is just give that a bit of a sculpt and smooth to see how that's going to transition. And you can see here that we do need some more geometry for the neck because we're starting to get a lot of splaying out. So let's add a few more loops there around the neck. And we can start to see that we're starting to get a natural loop that will travel around the base of the neck here as well. So that's going to work out really nicely. Cool. All right. Now for this little trouble spot, there's a few things we can do. One is what we can collapse an edge somewhere, or we can add another one somewhere. But let's go ahead and fill this in and you'll see what I mean. So in this case, we have a triangle left with this. Now, we could add, it depends on how these edges are going to travel up. We could add an extra edge, but my money is on collapsing an edge. It's always probably better to collapse an edge over, adding an edge. So let's see what we can do. Okay, so I think I have a solution. The solution is to have a span travel around the back of the head, basically. So I can do that by just adding a span here, fill it in like so, and now we have our change in direction. So that looks pretty clean, I think. And it kind of lines up with what we did at the back there. All we're going to do now is just sort of smooth that out, and it will make more sense, basically. And you can see that that's working out pretty well. All right, cool. If you need to clean up, just go ahead and clean up as needed. And now we have to do the front. So by and large, we don't really want to add any more spans going down the center of the body because there's plenty of density already. So this span here is safe to say going to link up to the middle span over here at the neck. So let's go ahead and just do that and add a split there to start rounding out the volume of the neck. Now, our shrink wrap is not playing too nice at the moment. There it goes. Just make sure you confirm the snapping sometimes when you are moving things around so it actually behaves as you expect. All right, cool. So there we have it. We have some geometry there to work with. All right. And I'm basically going to try and get these loops to be circular around the entire body. So these loops, this loop here, for instance, I want it to continue around the front of the body in a circular fashion. I want this one to continue around in a circular fashion. So what I'm going to do is start off by linking that up like so. And then I'm just going to replicate the pattern of the edges I have here to get that initial shape going. So there we go. That's looking pretty good. All right. So basically, these are going to be traveling around the neck almost entirely. So what we can do is start to fill that out. Let's go ahead and do that. All right. We've got one more here as well. Cool. All right. Let's go ahead and start to fill that out with a fill, and then just fill, 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 fill until you feel comfortable with what you got. And then we're going to fill out the rest. So we have 1, 2, 3 spans at the moment. Let's go with those 3 and just pin them in place and then do a grid fill, or just fill as needed. So we missed a span, so we're going to add an extra span here. Boom, boom. Sweet. Let's go ahead and refine that a little bit. Let's go ahead and, again, do the same thing as before. Duplicate the shrink wrap. Apply the first one. And then that will make it a little bit easier to do a sculpt and smooth pass. So just going to smooth those out a little bit. And suddenly things start to look a lot more consistent. So you can start to see that currently at the back, we have quite a bit more density at the back of the neck than we do at the front. That does affect animation, surprisingly, and deformation. And you generally want to keep the density relatively the same across the back and the front of the neck. So that does mean that eventually we'll have to add a few more spans going through the body. So that's not much of an issue, particularly around here where we can have the spans just travel down the leg through to the foot. So that's where these spans come into play, 1 and 2. And you can see we're getting a bit of stretching there anyway. So adding those spans in this case is not going to be much of a problem. All right. So let's go ahead and add those spans as needed. Let's add one there and add one here. Cool. And see how that affects what we can link up and what we can't. So you can see here that we have 2 spans, 1, 2, that will need to be filled over here. So let's go ahead and just bring this edge down like so, and that like so. And that will just give an indication of where the chin and jawline are going to connect eventually. So starting from probably along the side of the face, let's go from here to here, 2, 3. And you can start to see that we're starting to need to collapse some edges already. So we'll just keep that in mind for now. And let's see where this span is going to go if we look at the loops here. This one's going to go all the way across the back up to the head. All right, so if we were to add a span now, it's going to go actually into the eye and off, and then create an offset between the top and bottom of our eyelids. We don't want to have that happen. So temporarily, what I'm going to do is put a break in the neck at the moment, just here and here, just for now. So if I do add some extra spans, that it's not going to affect the rest of the face. You can see here that an extra span isn't going to do any harm because it's going to give us enough sort of even out the density across the midsection of the body anyway. So that's good. But we still have more edges here than what we need to go through the body. So let's just go ahead and do a fill for now and see what the problem is. So you can see here we have 1, 2, 3, and 4 edges here and only one edge or one face loop here to work with, which means we need to do some collapsing. So what we're going to do is I'm going to cut off this face here for now. And I'm going to add a few faces here, a few edges here. Okay. I'm going to fill those in. Okay. Let's actually just fill it up completely. Just fill it up completely so we can solve our little dilemma. Okay. Let's bring it down a little bit closer to home to where we will solve this problem. So instead of having these edges go all the way through the body, we are going to redirect them so they loop down and then up around the base of the neck or at the base of the neck. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a redirect like so. And that redirect is going to go along down to the midsection of the clavicle where the two clavicles meet. We're going to create a sort of throat, I guess you can say. And this is actually pretty good because if you do want to add like an Adam's apple or something like this will give you the geometry you need to extrude or create one essentially. So you can see here, just by doing those redirects, we now have a perfect connection for the neck. Okay, so all we need to do now is just smooth that out. And what that will do is essentially give us some volume in the neck that we could use to our advantage when it comes to, yeah, adding a little volume if you want to add some more sort of structure to the neckline, I guess you can say. So how do we fix this for the bottom of the jaw here, the back of the jaw here? Similar sort of thing. We can have it either travel around the neck like so. Let's just make sure that that's connected properly. Or we can just remove some stuff. So let's have a look and see what we can do. Okay, in this case, we do have a solution, but it only would apply properly to a female character in that we can have some edge loops that travel down around this way. And then help to form the sort of crease line of the breast tissue, and then it will meet in the middle like so. So with the male character, it probably wouldn't work as well, but in the case of this character, I think it will suffice. So what I'm going to do is firstly just go ahead and smooth some stuff out just to make sure that, you know, it will work and give us some space to work with. All right, cool. So we have how many spans? We don't want to have all the spans go through, by the way. We just want to, we can get away with 1 or 2. Or we can try and fill this out actually. So if it doesn't work this way, then we'll have to do the breast way. Go with the breast way, I guess you can say. So firstly, let's link this up. All right, cool. We have a loop that can go around this way. So these loops can actually travel around the back of the neck. So these ones here can probably go this way. That solves that issue. This one will also go that way. And now we have pretty much all we need. Actually, that will solve a lot of the problems. Okay, so we can fill this one in now, like so. And now we have a single triangle to fix. So how do we fix this triangle? Well, we can solve it by splitting an edge. So we can either split an edge so that we add an extra one going down through. In this case, I would add that going through the rest down the breast tissue and around to the front. That's one way of fixing it. Another way of fixing it would be to just collapse something. So collapse it like so. That will lead us to another issue of, you know, same problem, but like further down the face. is where we would redirect that. If I were to add that now, it's going to go through the body. And I don't really want it to go throughout the body because we have plenty of geometry to work with already. So I think I might actually go ahead and try my approach for the for this setup. Another way of fixing this would be simply to have more spans going across the arm. So that's another issue, another way you can do it too. So let's go ahead and undo that. So another way of fixing this would basically be to add an extra set of faces going along the arm, and that could be useful for you if you have a very chunky character. So if you need more volume around the character, then that's great. My issue is that, again, I like to keep things relatively even. So nine edges is not going to do anyone favors, but I also like to keep things consistent in terms of its density across the front and back of the arms, and that does make a difference in terms of articulation. So if I was going to add a span here, I'll do the same thing here. And I'm being semantic, and I'll do the same thing at the bottom, like so. Now, not necessarily a bad thing in this case because we're adding consistent amount of geometry on the side of the leg rather than on the front of the leg, which has plenty already at the front. Now, if we were to count and see how many spans we have on the legs, we have 18. So that's not too bad. It's an even amount. It makes it a lot easier to fill in. And along the arm, we have 10. We'll have 12, which is great for when we have to make the hands. So that actually works out quite well. So I'd probably go with that. I think that will look good, and it gives us enough density to fill out and pad out the shoulders as well, which is nice. So I think I'm going to go with that method. That will allow me to fill that in and gives us everything we need for the neck. As for what we got here, we have an extra face, an extra edge to fill in. So you can see here we have 2 spans here and 1 span here. So how do we fix that? Well, there is a simple way. The simple way is to just kill off a span with a triangle at the back of the head. So basically, I'll just create a span here, like so. And then do a grid fill. That's probably the safest way of doing things, the bit that doesn't require all that much effort either. And no one's going to see that triangle. It doesn't matter at all. It's not going to affect deformation or anything really. Yeah, even the way that you groom a character's hair is not going to be affected by that. So that's probably the easiest way to fix it. And I'm going to live with that. And if you were to be very, very pedantic and you want to keep quads, just add a quad split here. Just do that. That's fine. Yeah, you can also do it further up along the head if you wanted to, but yeah, it doesn't make any difference. Cool. All right, so that's the neck and the head done. And of course, if you feel like you don't need that much geometry going down the neck, you should safely be able to kill off any edges that you don't want. So if you feel like it's too dense, then you can just, delete them and it won't affect anything else. But you can see here that now we have an effective amount of geometry to work with for our character. Now, of course, if you want to add even more geometry, say if you did want to have the character be naked, you could simply add more geometry by adding some circular loops in the breast tissue. So basically, you just grab the area of the breast that you think would be most effective for an extrusion, and then do an inset eye to give you that extra geometry, and that will give you more geometry to work with and sort of isolate out the breast area to basically be able to add as much density as you want. So that's one way you can do it. All right, cool. I'll keep that there for now. That's not a problem. I'll probably have to delete them in the future once I put clothes on top, but that's not a problem. But you can see here that now things are starting to look a lot better already. Now you can see here along the shoulder, we can start to add more density there too. And that will give us better definition in the shoulder as well. We can also add more definition here, and that will just travel around the back of the back, which is going to be nice and clean. So you can see the reason why I'm being pretty considerate about these loops, specifically around the body and the shoulders, is it just prevents me from creating these crazy spirals or redirects that go all the way around the body, and can drive me nuts. All right, cool. You can see here though that we do have some issues in the sense that, in my opinion, at least, the density across the top and the bottoms of the arms aren't consistent with the back of the arms. So, and with the front of the arms, less so though, but yeah. So I'm not going to touch the front of the arms all that much, but the back of the arms, I definitely feel like we can use a little bit more geometry. So I'm going to go ahead and just add, I'm going to move this loop down, and add an extra 2 spans. That will give me 14 edges to work with around the arm. That's by no means a huge amount, and it will still give me plenty of geometry to work with for the hands. And I think, oh, what's that split going? Okay, so our shrink wrap is acting up again. Okay, let's go ahead and duplicate that shrink wrap and apply the first one as always, and then do another sculpt pass. There we go. But you can see it's looking pretty damn good in my opinion. And that back muscle, like I said, you don't really need to have crazy geometry to define the back. You just have a decent sculpt, because ultimately what you're going to end up having is enough geometry that it sort of starts to define the back anyway. So that looks all right. You can probably start to soften out some density in there as well. Obviously, there's a lot of extra spans going through the back of the butt. So it may be prudent not to kill it off, but to just spread them out a little bit. Now, this extra density shouldn't really affect animation all that much with the rig, because the weights should be distributed evenly across the midsection, and you're probably going to get a pretty even split between like the left and right leg, for instance, when it comes to what defines what. Now, of course, if you were creating a character with clothes, this wouldn't even matter, because you wouldn't actually model or at least keep the model underneath with this in mind. So this is mostly to do with like nude characters, I guess, or semi-nude characters, like a bikini or something like that, that this would matter the most. Cool. All right, nice. Now you might be wondering, why haven't I just killed off the loops in the crotch area, like sort of done a sort of abdomen loop? The main issue I find is that whenever I do that, at least with female characters, it starts to look a bit crotchy, like a little bit too bulgy. Okay, so that's one way we can. That is one way we can fix it. But yeah, just be mindful, if you don't want a character to look too bulgy, it may cause some issues. So the way to solve this would be basically to outline the abdomen area by killing off some loops here. So you could technically do a redirect somewhere around here or here. So basically just delete these 4, and then this loop would connect here. Well, let's actually kill off over here. This actually makes more sense to do it here. Let's kill off a loop there. You would merge it like so. Like that. And then you have to add a loop here, probably. And then delete these edges here. Merge this here. And then add a cut there. And then you start to merge things together, basically. We'll still have to keep a span in mind. We just basically reduced it by a factor of 1, basically. So you can see here, it's not all that advantageous, although it would help to kill off this extra span. Okay, so as an example, let's do this as an example. So this span here is going to travel all the way over here like so, and you can see, perfect way to kill that off. So yeah, there are ways you can go ahead and sort of reduce that geometry, and things do tend to work out. So you can see here, if we go ahead and now merge that together, we now have this going on. So basically it helps that we can define our abdomen area a little bit more. Just be mindful where you create that redirect, because it will add, as you can see, more bulge. All right. So if you need that, that's great. But that could be a good thing for you, if you want to keep it like that. So it all comes with pros and cons. So I'm going to keep it like this because it actually solves a few things in my end. And because my character's going to be wearing clothes, the bulge doesn't matter. All right. So these are just those sort of things that you can consider when, connecting different parts of the body together. And now if we look at the loops here, we have a loop that goes all the way down, up and around. This loop goes around the body and then up to the front, and so on and so forth. And that looks pretty damn good in my opinion. So that's pretty sweet. Okay, the final thing to do before we jump onto the hand is just to make sure that the distribution of the edges look clean in the legs. So you can see here we've got some high density, and then we got some low density, and then we got some high density. And part of that is just about smoothing. So just go ahead and smooth that distribution a little bit out. You can do this either with sculpting or with just the smooth tool. Now you can see things are starting to look a little bit twisty there. So what I would recommend in this case, along with smoothing, is just you may need to twist it back into place a little bit just to get that, make sure that that midsection line is looking clean down the body without it traveling around to the front or in a weird direction. So you can see here they're starting to travel around the back there, if that makes sense. So I wouldn't mind just twisting that forward a little bit across the entirety of the leg, just to straighten that up a little bit. Cool. All right. Now that's looking a lot better. We can do a final sort of sculpty smooth pass there, and things start to look a little bit cleaner. So it's always good to sort of assess that density and see what you're working with, where things can be improved, that sort of thing. And sometimes it's just about just nudging things around. It could be an illusion that some parts are more dense than others, other than just the fact that you haven't, paid enough attention to where you've placed your geometry. All right, so let's have a quick look and see how this is looking with subdivision turned on and soft shading or smooth shading turned on. So let's go ahead and select our model, turn on our subdivision. And you can see that, firstly, the detail is popping. It's starting to pop out really well. That's also in conjunction with the shrink wrap. And if we turn on smooth shade, things are looking really good, in my opinion. Things are looking really clean. And these details from the sculpt are coming through to the model really clearly. That means that if you were to unwrap this, UV unwrap this, and then do a bake this detail down to a normal map or a bump map, you're going to get those abdomen details, those back muscle details, that sort of stuff into the geometry without you having to actually model in all that detail at all. So that's super useful. Okay, so the great thing about this still is that if you wanted to increase that fidelity even further, you can sculpt on top of this with a multi-res and then bake that detail down as well. So there's a lot of flexibility with this topology that we have at the moment. So it's looking really good. So that, in my opinion, means that we can move on to the hands. All right, so that is it for the body. As you can see, it is quite a bit of work to get things done, but you're gonna be so proud of what you create once you get it done, and you'll be absolutely blown away by how well the body articulates once it's rigged. So in the next video, we are going to do the hands and possibly the feet. And hopefully we can move on to doing the rest of the character, like the hair and the clothing as well. So until next time, thank you for watching, catches, and have fun. Cheers.